This gentleman right here is a retired colonel in the U.S. Army. His name's Rich Gary. And he was head of ROTC here at Penn State for 3 years. He was also part of this extraction team with Serge, who you will meet in a second, I'll show you, and myself and Rich. We spent 4 to 5 days, day and night, just endlessly trying to figure things out to get these folks and other folks with Rich to the final moment, get them out of Afghanistan. Rich did 7 tours in Afghanistan. Rafi, who is my partner on this project, co-directed the entire project with my wife and myself. And on the far side, the right side of the screen is Serge Dadepo. And Serge Dadepo works at NATO, and then he became part of this group. Welcome back to Social 119. It's really great. Really great to have you. Serge, you were a soldier in the Belgian army, and you served in Kosovo. Am I right? Yeah.
Yugoslavia, Croatia.
And Rich, you were in Afghanistan how many times?
5 times Afghanistan, twice to Iraq.
Mm-hmm. What was your first impression of Afghans when you arrived in your first tour?
Yeah, unfortunately, the first time I arrived there back in 2002, I had no understanding. I had no idea what I was getting into. I had no understanding of the culture, the Afghan people. I read one book about Afghanistan in the days preceding my deployment, and I just didn't know anything about them. I immediately, tried to apply my value system, my culture, how I understood other people in my limited experience, only being in the United States, onto them. And I initially thought, this is just a strange place, such a strange people. How will I don't understand them because I didn't know anything about their culture. And, I was very naive in my understanding and what I thought about the people of Afghanistan. And I learned over time, and over that year, I learned a lot about the people. But I was very naive when I first got off the plane. I like you guys, I didn't know anything. I knew that they had, were constantly been at war. But they've been at war for 1,000 years, and that's all they know is fighting. And it's a third world country, and they don't even have running water over there. And I said, man, I figured it was like landing on the moon.
What drives you to pursue such a difficult path in life?
Yeah, so I decided to join the military when I was 14 years old, and the why you cannot really explain, because it's really it's a gut feeling, it's a drive. But I think at that age, it's mainly driven by stereotypes about Hollywood and the military and heroism, idealism, and sacrifice and patriotism. All of that, I think, is what was driving me at that time. And of course, much later now, I say that's stupid. That should not be that. But I think this is what it was. And we can elaborate a lot of it. But what do you know at that age, except what you see on the TV and the military recruit a lot of young men, because at that age you don't think with your context. You think you don't think, right? And that now I don't regret anything, but I think it's not a reasonable decision. As you say, how do you go in that difficult path? Because we all have that thing, we do risky sports. Why? Because we are driven to do that by some kind of instinct. And so I wanted to be a hero, right? And they were telling me that's crazy. People get harmed. It's tough. You might be killed. I said, this is what I want. Not to be killed. No, to be a person going through harshness and sacrifice, to come back and say I've done something great for the rest of the world. And I mean. That's not reasonable at all.
Last night, you were still trying to get a family. All this morning, you were trying to get them out. I mean, tell us kind of what happened. They were near the airport. They were in hiding. I was following all your text messages. Give the class kind of a sense of that.
Yeah. So we had that final family that was still there. They had been a couple kilometers from the airport for the last couple of days. This is a family that has 5 people. It's a husband, wife, a son that's 4, a son that's 2, and a father that is 74. So that's a tough group they're not very mobile. They don't move fast. So we were trying to get them to the gate at the right time. We had all their paperwork. We had to wait for their immigration visa to be approved. And that really didn't happen until yesterday morning, where we knew that they were on a list. We didn't want to send them to the gate and get them into the gate, and then they would be turned away if their paperwork wasn't straight, if they weren't on the list. So we had to wait for that to happen. So we finally got them, moving and up to the gate. They couldn't get anywhere near it. And we knew from the previous nights working with the other families that this sewage-filled ditch was there, and that if they got in the ditch, they could kind of bypass a lot of the crowd and get up near the gate. And they were going to the Abbey gate, which is right down from the gate that the other families used the other night. And the crowd swell and move, and they got up to the gate, and then the Taliban showed up, and they were trying to push people away from the gate, and they were beating people with whips and rubber hoses and chains. And this family fled from the gate after being there for 5 or 6 hours. They fled, and then the Taliban were shooting at them. So they were hiding in a ditch about 500 meters away behind a mosque, and they're texting us. We're talking to them the whole time, and they're asking, what should we do? What should we do? And we're talking to people by text on the inside, trying to get them to come out and rescue this family. And the situation was such that they could not. And so for 16 hours, we tried to get this family back up to the gate, and they did. It eventually came back out of the ditch and back up in the ditch, and they got to the Abbey gate, and they waited there for another 7 or 8 hours, and they could just not get past the crowds to get their paperwork looked at. And then sometime this morning, about 6 o'clock this morning, 5 o'clock this morning, they said, we have to go. We can't do it anymore. The children are exhausted and scared, and we're whooped. We can't be there anymore. And I was encouraging them to stay. I said, don't leave. This is your only shot. The gates are going to close, a few hours from now. You have to stay at the Abbey gate. And they insisted that they could not. And I was upset. I knew they were, having difficulty, but I also thought if they didn't seize on that opportunity and stay at the Abbey gate and get in the Abbey gate, that they might not get out of Afghanistan. Now, luckily, the terrible events that happened today, luckily they were not at the Abbey gate today when the suicide bombs went off that killed so many people. So I'm thankful for that. But there were a lot of people there, and they had just been there. And so now they are back in hiding in Kabul, and we're trying to talk about what other options we have, because we don't believe that the airport is an option anymore for this family. They're not high enough on the priority list. So those 2 little kids and that husband and wife, we're going to continue to work to try to get them to safety through another means, hopefully. A friend of mine, a very close personal friend of mine, reached out to me and said, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help this family. I heard you were helping other families. Can you help them? So I don't know them personally, but I've certainly become very acquainted with them over the last 7 days.
What's the moment where you feel like it's all worth it in this situation? Or is there ever a moment where you're thinking it's not worth all this stress?
Yeah, definitely. I think definitely for me, but I heard that from many other military, is the satisfaction, the meaning of doing something that is useful to other people. I think I hear that very often. It definitely is a driver for me. And it's still the idealistic young boy speaking, but there's a thing, you want to be feeling that you do something for society, and the best way, definitely, if you save somebody, that's probably the best thing, and that's what we did. But you can get also that from your let's say brothers and sisters in arms, because I would say it's not that you are saving people every day, but the fact that in the harshness, you are helping the people who are next to you, and it's often the other military working with you. That this is, to me, what provides the most satisfaction. Now, I cannot resist to tell you that this is also what would give you the worst frustration, when you get the opposite. When the people around you are actually not happy with being there for whatever reason. So you can get the best feedback from helping people and getting their gratitude. But if it fails for whatever reason and you get the opposite, it's the worst thing that you can get. So I think that social negative feedback is also the worst thing, and I think it might apply to everyone in any situation.
This classroom full of young people from not only here in the United States, but from many parts of the world. And we've got this big humanitarian crisis. And a lot of people will say, why are we still there? Why are we helping? Or why are we doing this? And there's a lot of just questioning because people don't know. Help us to frame in a way, help us to understand what's happening among Afghans. And so, frame it from not only why you do this, but, for both of you, why you have other people in your work, Rich, you in the military, because, many people have this idea that, there are people in militaries, they only exist to go out and kill people and kill bad guys or whatever it is, right? But help us to frame what it is that you think it would be good if we knew. What do we need to know, or what about Afghanistan and Afghan people?
Yeah, I'll take that one on for a sec, Sam. Like Serge, I think, the first time I went to Afghanistan, I think I was 29 or 30 years old, and I was still like Serge, right? I was very idealistic. I had patriotism, and coursing through my veins, and I was post 9/11, and I was gonna, I wanted to be John Wayne. I wanted to be the hero. I was seeking out the adventure. I was going to go there and right wrongs, and that's not what I ended up doing. I mean, yes, there were times when we had to do things that were lethal to bad guys, but the things that are most rewarding for me, and the things that I appreciated the most, was the things that consumed most of my time was working with the people of Afghanistan. And I mean, everything from helping them dig wells to, we built schools and we got school supplies. I mean, the high school that I went to, sent thousands of dollars worth of school supplies so the little village I was living in could have a school. And we used to walk down there in the morning when we first got there to escort the little girls and boys to school because we were worried about the Taliban would not let them do that. And then after a while, we didn't have to escort them anymore because the people in the town were escorting them because they wanted the girls and boys to have education. And, just little wins like that, everything from medical clinics to education to, I secured a provincial election back in 2014. And seeing all the women that were there to vote. And I know going back to 2004 when I was there, that would never have happened, that there was no women that voted because they didn't feel comfortable doing so, but so many did in 2014. And I said, that's progress. We made progress. We were doing great things. And a lot of that, that's what I really found rewarding about my many years in Afghanistan was the progress that we made and the things that I used to, because we had soldiers that were killed, and I used to, give solace, I think, to some of their families and say, look at the progress that your son or daughter helped make. And now over the last couple of weeks, that feels like that has gone away. So the work over the last week has been to try to salvage some of that. I think that's because a lot of that feels lost, so those soldiers there, and we've done nothing. We're just helping people. Serge and I, we've coordinated things, but those people at the airport, right? Those soldiers at the airport, they, in my mind, have saved a generation of Afghans. Is it worth it? Is it worth the cost of what happened today where 12 soldiers were killed? You can't put a math equation against this. Would we sacrifice 12 people to cure cancer? Well, sure, maybe, probably it makes sense, right? 12 people. Well, we saved a generation of Afghans. Those soldiers there, they're doing this Herculean effort to remove these threatened Afghans, these endangered Afghans, and who knows what's going to happen, right? Their children and their children's children that never would have had an opportunity. Well, now in the Netherlands, in the United States, and in Belgium and France, they'll grow up and they'll be There'll be doctors and there'll be lawyers and there'll be artists and there'll be musicians and they'll vote and they'll do things because they were salvaged this week from a terrible circumstance. And, my hope is that maybe in the future, maybe a decade, maybe 5 years, that, that little piece of salvation that we provided for just a short period of time, unfortunately, that piece, that the people there will maybe remember that. And then maybe they will resist the oppressive things that are happening with the Taliban regime right now. And maybe they will work to get back to where we were. But that's, this week has been for me is kind of trying to salvage some of that stuff that I feel like I've lost over the last couple of weeks that we worked so hard for so long.
My question is, what did you learn that the rest of the people should know from interacting with the Afghan people?
So I will get you a little bit back in time, guys, because I'm older. So I was deploying for the first time in those kind of situations in '92 for the war in former Yugoslavia. And basically what I learned there totally applied to Afghanistan, and I think it applies everywhere. People are people. The stereotype we put on their forehead for whatever reason actually does not apply. They are not such a thing as totally good guys and totally bad guys. People are good in some circumstances and bad in some circumstances. And of course, those are concepts that are subjective. But in Yugoslavia, basically it was a slightly different situation from Afghanistan, because there it was three factions fighting one another. So it was not that they'd be good or bad. They all have their own view of the country. They don't agree, they fight. And in the middle of that, you have the population that suffers, and then you drop on it a ton of military from I don't know how many nations. So you have really a cultural melting pot. And what I learned already early on there is those people are all the same. They all have a family. They all have to figure out how they will survive one more day. And for some, it might be easier. And if you put them in the, let's say, correct environment, they will be doing great things. But if you put them in the really wrong system, they actually end up doing what you might say a bad thing. And so this decision of doing right or wrong, I mean, it's a nice story, but I think it's really a tale. And all the Afghans, wherever side they are, if you provide them with the right environment, they will just not do harm. Even and actually most of them are not doing any harm, but even evil doers. You can change that. And I mean, what you try to create a better environment, but you see that it's extremely difficult, and most of the time we fail in that. And that's probably the lesson that everyone has actually the will to be good, but might not have a choice in the environment where they live or where they were born.
You had many opportunities to be in the homes of Afghans and to share tea with them. You probably had...
Yeah, I think this is something I learned in Afghanistan, but it doesn't necessarily apply to just Afghans. That first trip, I remember, we were looking for the Taliban. We wanted to know who the Taliban were. That's what we were sent there to do, to eliminate the Taliban. And I went into a village one day and I asked the village elder, I said, hey, I want to know who here is Taliban or who here supported the Taliban, because we want to arrest them with the Afghan National Security Forces. We want to know who those guys were, who supported the Taliban. He said, well, I guess you're going to have to arrest me. And I said, I don't understand. What do you mean? Why would I need to arrest you? And he said, well, because when the Russians were here, I was with the Russians. And when the Taliban were here, I was with the Taliban. And now you are here, and so I am with you. He said, I want to survive. I want to have my family. I want to protect my family. I want to raise some crops, and I want to just enjoy my life. And if I have to be with the guy who's here, who's in charge, then that's where I will be. And that really took me back, right? Like Serge said, we're all very common, right? People just want to be happy. They want to survive. They want to have a family. They want to do the things that are enjoyable to them. And that transcends nations and tribes and, and geography. And I used to tell my soldiers, everybody has a story. You have to learn that story to understand where it all fits together. You can't judge anybody and say, he's a bad guy, he's a good guy, he's not worth our time, until you can learn their story. And that's what I learned in, 5 years in Afghanistan and a couple of years in Iraq and the other places I've been, is that everybody has a story, and you can't truly appreciate them or their culture or where they fit until you understand that story. And you have to just sit down and talk to them and listen to it and hear their story. And in Afghanistan, you hear that story over a lot of tea, over a lot of time. And they're all great stories.
Those who are not high ranking and stuff are really not looking for any kind of mess and are really willing to share the little that they have.